One phone call. That's all it took to expose the biggest lie my family ever told me. A lie so carefully crafted, so perfectly hidden, that I lived an entire year believing I had nothing, while they quietly spent everything that was always meant to be mine. But here's the twist. The moment I found out the truth, I didn't explode. I didn't break down. I smiled because I finally understood exactly who they were. And more importantly, I knew exactly what I was going to do about it. I never expected a single phone call to redraw the entire map of my life. But that's exactly what happened on a dull Thursday afternoon, when the sky looked like wet concrete and my mood wasn't far behind it. I was halfway through reheating leftovers when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Normally, I'd let it ring, but something, maybe instinct or fate, or the ghost of a decision I hadn't made yet, made me answer. "Is this Jackson Reed?" the voice asked, calm, professional, detached in a way that let me know he dealt with people like me all day, people about to hear something they weren't ready for. "Yes," I said. "This is Attorney Pierce's office. We've been trying to reach you regarding your grandmother's estate." I froze. My grandmother passed nearly a year ago. A quiet funeral, a messy aftermath, and a family that scattered like spilled marbles afterward. I thought everything was settled. I thought any loose ends had been tied in ways I didn't need to think about. "What about it?" I finally asked. "There are documents you haven't reviewed. We need you to come in." Most people might feel worry, confusion, maybe the sting of grief resurfacing. But me, I felt something colder, something deeper. Something like recognition. My family had always been good at secrets. Hiding, twisting, burying things they didn't want me to know. And for most of my life, I let them. I believed silence meant safety. I believed distance meant peace. But as I stood there with my phone pressed to my ear, my food turning into a forgotten lump in the microwave, I felt a familiar ache in my chest. The ache of knowing something had been taken from me before I even had the chance to claim it. "I'll be there." The moment I hung up, my apartment felt different. Smaller, somehow. Like the walls were closing in with questions I couldn't answer yet. I sat down on my couch, staring at nothing in particular, letting my mind race through possibilities. What documents? What hadn't I reviewed? And more importantly, why was I only hearing about this now, almost a full year after her death? I thought back to the funeral, how my uncle had taken charge of everything, how he'd spoken at the service with tears in his eyes, talking about family and legacy, and how we all needed to stick together. How he'd pulled me aside afterward and told me there wasn't much left in the estate, just some old furniture and a few sentimental items. How he'd made it sound like he was doing me a favor by handling all the paperwork so I didn't have to deal with the burden. At the time, I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He was family. He was the one who always seemed to have it together, the one everyone turned to when things got complicated. But now, sitting alone in my apartment with that lawyer's voice still echoing in my head, I started to wonder if I'd been played. The law office was quiet when I arrived. A receptionist with a frozen smile led me down a hallway lined with certificates and gold-trimmed frames. I tried not to stare too long at my reflection in the glass. Tired eyes, tight jaw, shoulders tense like I was walking into an interrogation. When Attorney Pierce finally stepped into the room, he looked like someone who had practiced disappointing people gently. He sat across from me, opened a thick folder, and pushed it toward me. "These are the documents pertaining to your grandmother's final directives," he said. I hesitated before opening it. Something in me already knew whatever was inside wasn't going to feel like a gift. It was going to feel like a wound. But still, I opened the folder. The first page made my breath hitch. My name. Not scribbled in the margins, not tucked in the footnotes, centered, bold. The primary beneficiary of her personal estate. I blinked hard. I thought everything was left to my uncle. "That's what your family told you." "Yes." He sighed, soft, but heavy with meaning. That was not her intent. Each page I turned felt like peeling back a lie I had lived under for too long. According to the documents, my grandmother had left me her condo, her savings, and several personal assets. It wasn't an amount that would make headlines, but it was enough to change the direction of my life, enough to matter, enough to pay off my debts, maybe go back to school, or finally start that business I'd been dreaming about. So, why didn't I know? Pierce reached for another paper, sliding it forward. "This is the issue," he said. "These signatures aren't yours." I stared at the page. There, in shaky handwriting meant to imitate mine, was something that looked like my name, but wasn't. A forgery, a ghost version of my identity. Someone had signed documents on my behalf, transferring assets, closing accounts, making decisions about money that was never theirs to touch. I felt a heat rising through me, anger, disbelief, betrayal, all wrapping around my throat like a tightening fist. Who signed this? He didn't answer right away. He didn't need to. The truth was already slamming into me from all sides. My uncle. The same uncle who handled the funeral arrangements. The same uncle who told me there wasn't anything left worth dividing. The same uncle who hugged me at the burial, gripping my shoulders like he was holding me together. My voice cracked before I could steady it. He signed everything, didn't he? He didn't offer sympathy. He didn't try to soften the blow. The evidence suggests he assumed authority he did not have. I wasn't sure if I wanted to laugh or scream, maybe both. Because, of course the family that spent years teaching me to be grateful for scraps had stolen the only thing someone ever meant entirely for me. My grandmother had always been the one person who saw me without conditions. She never compared me to my cousins. She never made me feel like I had to earn her love. She just gave it freely, without expectations. And now, even her final act of love had been intercepted. I pushed the papers aside and rubbed my forehead. Why now? Why tell me this a year later? Because, he said, your uncle attempted to sell one of the assets last month, and when the buyer did due diligence, he tilted his head. Your name came up. It felt like being punched, not in the physical sense, worse, in the emotional sense, the kind of blow that leaves you breathless but silent. So what happens next? I asked. That depends on how far you want to take this. Those words hung in the air. I thought about every Christmas where my family made me feel like the outsider. Every comment about how I wasn't responsible enough. Every time they made decisions on my behalf and called it love. Every time they dismissed my voice, my choices, my autonomy. How far was I willing to go? I didn't know yet, but I knew I was done being silent. Pierce leaned back in his chair, studying me carefully. I need to be honest with you, Jackson. This isn't going to be easy. Your uncle has already liquidated some of the assets. The condo was sold 8 months ago. The savings accounts were drained. What's left is complicated to recover. But it can be recovered? I asked. Possibly, with the right legal action. But it's going to require you to go against your family publicly. Court filings, testimonies, evidence gathering. It won't be quiet. I nodded slowly. And if I don't, then he gets away with it, and your grandmother's wishes die with her. That sentence hit me harder than anything else, because this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about honoring the one person who actually saw me, the one person who believed I deserved more than what everyone else was willing to give me. I looked Pierce in the eye. Tell me what I need to do. When I left the office, the wind outside felt colder, sharper, like even the weather knew my world had changed in a way I couldn't undo. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. My uncle's number flashed on my phone almost immediately. Someone had told him I visited the lawyer. I didn't answer. Not yet. I drove instead to my grandmother's old neighborhood. I parked across from her building, staring at the windows that used to glow warmly whenever I visited her. I remembered her voice, soft and certain. "You'll understand someday, Jax. You'll see why I trust you." I didn't understand then, but I did now. She'd trusted me more than the people who claimed to love me unconditionally, and they'd stolen that trust, cashed it, spent it, buried it under lies. The building looked different now. Someone else lived in her unit. The curtains were different, the plants that she used to keep on the balcony were gone. It was like she'd been erased, replaced, forgotten by everyone except me. I thought about all the afternoons I'd spent there, how she'd make tea and we'd sit by the window watching the city move below us, how she'd ask me about my dreams, not my job or my relationship status or whether I was doing enough with my life, just my dreams, what made me happy, what I wanted to become.
She never made me feel small. She never made me feel like I had to prove myself. And in return, I'd loved her in a way I couldn't quite explain, not just as a grandmother, but as the only person who truly saw me. And now I knew. She'd tried to give me something that would change my life, something that would give me freedom, opportunity, a foundation to build on, and my family had stolen it before I even knew it existed. My phone buzzed again. This time I let it ring all the way through. I watched the screen go dark, and in the reflection, I saw a version of myself I hadn't met before. Someone tired of being underestimated. Someone tired of losing by staying quiet. Someone ready to step into the fight, even if it meant stepping alone. I started the car. If my family wanted to play with signatures, deception, and silent betrayals, then they were about to learn what it felt like when silence finally broke. 3 days later, I got a text from my mom. Short and direct. "We need to talk. Come over tonight." I knew what it was about. Word had spread. Someone, probably my uncle, had told them I'd been digging into the estate, and now they wanted to control the narrative before I could. I took a deep breath before stepping into the living room, because I knew the moment I walked in, everything would shift. And sure enough, all three of them were sitting there like they were holding a family board meeting about my life. My mom spoke first, in that voice she uses when she wants something but pretends she's being reasonable. "Since you received that money unexpectedly," she said, "it only makes sense that the family benefits. We've supported you for years. This is your moment to give back." Give back. That phrase hit harder than anything else. Like I owed them for existing. Like I was in debt for being born into this family. My sister chimed in next, crossing her arms like she was auditioning for the role of the victim. "You literally wouldn't even have that money if it wasn't for the opportunities this family gave you." Mind you, they hadn't given me anything. No tuition, no rent help, no emotional support, just guilt, lifelong guilt, constant reminders of how much they sacrificed, even though I never asked them to. But now that there was money involved, suddenly they remembered they were a family. I sat down slowly, letting them talk, not interrupting, not reacting, just listening. Because at that moment, I wasn't angry. I was calculating. They thought the money had turned me naive. What they didn't know was that it had actually made me very, very awake. My dad leaned forward. "Look, sweetheart, we already decided on the amounts. Your mother handled the breakdown." He slid a paper across the table. Not a suggestion, not a discussion, a bill. A literal, itemized invoice of what they believed I owed them. $4,200 for childhood expenses, $8,000 for room and board after age 18, $3,500 for unpaid family favors, $6,000 for future support contributions, and the rest, just random nonsense they made up on the spot. Total, $21,700. I stared at the number, then at them. They were dead serious. I could have exploded right then, cried, screamed, broken down, but I didn't. Instead, I smiled. Because they just handed me exactly what I needed. Proof. Proof that this wasn't family. It was a transaction to them, and I was the product. You want this paid? I asked calmly. My mom nodded enthusiastically. Yes, immediately if possible. I leaned back. Cool, I said. I'll handle it. Their whole vibe shifted. 3 smug smiles, 3 people thinking I'd finally given in, 3 people clueless about the trap they'd walked into. My sister even laughed a little. See, I told you he'd understand once we explained it properly. My dad patted my shoulder. This is what family does. We take care of each other. I nodded, smiled, said nothing. Because the payment they wanted, oh, they were going to get it. Just not the way they thought. Not even close. The next morning, I woke up with a kind of clarity I hadn't felt in years. The kind you get when the curtain finally drops and you see people exactly for who they are. I didn't text them, I didn't call, I didn't argue. I got in my car, drove straight to the bank, and asked to speak to the branch manager. He was a quiet guy with glasses and a tie that looked a little too tight, but he listened carefully as I explained everything. How the money came in, how my family was pressuring me, how they were demanding payments for things that should never have been transactional. He glanced at the numbers on the invoice and let out a soft, "Wow, that's creative." I almost laughed. Yeah, they really went all in. Then he looked me dead in the eye and said the exact sentence that changed everything. You don't owe them anything, but if you want to protect this money, you need to move fast. So we did. Together, we created a new private account under a different tier of security, one that required in-person verification and no online access. Then, with his help, I set up a trust account with myself as the sole beneficiary. He walked me through every step, explained every option, made sure I understood that once the money was in that trust, it was untouchable. No one could claim it, no one could force me to transfer it, no one could even prove it existed unless I chose to disclose it. Meaning, no one could access the money, no one could claim the money, and no one would ever know where it went. By the time I walked out, the funds were gone from the original account, completely invisible to anyone who thought they had a right to them. The manager shook my hand at the door. "Good luck," he said quietly. "And for what it's worth, you're doing the right thing." I didn't respond. I just nodded and left. The timing couldn't have been better because the moment I pulled into my driveway, my phone started blowing up. First, a text from my mom. "Did you send the payment?" Then my sister. "Need confirmation. Dad wants to check." Then the call from my dad, which I ignored. Then another, and another. 5 calls, 7 texts, 2 guilt paragraphs, 1 angry voice note where my mom's voice cracked with frustration. "Jackson, we're your family. Why are you doing this?" They were panicking. They expected compliance. What they got was silence. I waited a full hour before responding. Finally, I sent one message in the family group chat. "Your invoice has been received. My payment is processing. I'll update you soon." The freezing was intentional, vague enough to calm them, sharp enough to buy me time, careful enough to lay the groundwork. My sister replied immediately. "Processing how? When?" I didn't answer. My dad called again. I let it ring. My mom sent another text. "Jackson, this isn't funny. We need that money this week." I turned my phone face down and sat in the quiet of my apartment. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to peace. Because I wasn't just protecting my money anymore. I was preparing my escape, a permanent one. 2 days later, I met with Attorney Pierce again. This time, I brought everything. The fake invoice from my family, the records of my uncle's forgery, screenshots of the pressure texts, voice notes, everything. He reviewed it all carefully, taking notes, occasionally raising his eyebrows at the audacity of it all. "This is actually helpful," he said. "It establishes a pattern of financial manipulation. If your uncle tries to claim he had your permission or acted in good faith, this contradicts that narrative." "So, what's next?" I asked. "We file, formally. We go after the assets he liquidated, and we make it clear that you were defrauded. It's going to take time. Months, maybe longer, but you have a strong case." I nodded. "Do it."
He paused. You understand this will become public record. Your family will know. They'll fight back. Let them. Because I was done protecting people who never protected me, done staying quiet to keep the peace, done pretending that silence was the same as love. And what came next? That was the part they never saw coming. The part where I walked into their home one last time, sat them down, and delivered a truth they'd been avoiding for years. A truth worth far more than $21,700. A truth that would end everything. I arrived unannounced. My mom opened the door, surprised, but smiling like she thought I'd come to hand over the money. Jackson, we were just talking about you. Come in, come in. I walked in, sat down, waited for them all to gather. Then I pulled out the legal documents and placed them on the table. What's this? My dad asked. That, I said calmly, is a lawsuit against Uncle Mark for fraud, forgery, and theft of my inheritance. The room went silent. My mom's face drained of color. What are you talking about? I said, Grandma left me everything, the condo, the savings, all of it, and Uncle Mark forged my signature to steal it. My sister laughed nervously. That's insane. You're making this up. I slid the documents toward her. Read it yourself. She did, and her face changed. My dad looked at my mom. Did you know about this? She didn't answer. She just stared at me like I'd betrayed them. You want to know what's insane? You made me an invoice. You charged me for being born, for existing, for breathing. And you actually thought I'd pay it? We're family, my mom said weakly. No, family doesn't steal. Family doesn't manipulate. Family doesn't make you feel guilty for existing. I stood up. The money's protected. Uncle Mark's going to court. And I'm done. Done with what? My sister asked. With all of you. I walked to the door. My mom called after me, but I didn't turn around. Because sometimes the most powerful payment isn't money. It's the moment you finally stop letting people take from you. It's the moment you realize your silence was never weakness. It was strategy. It's the moment you stand up, look them in the eye, and say the one thing they never thought you'd have the courage to say. I'm done. And I was. Done being their product, done being their backup plan, done being the person they only remembered when they needed something. My grandmother saw my worth when no one else did. She trusted me with her legacy, and I wasn't going to let anyone steal that from me again. Not my uncle, not my parents, not anyone. The money was safe, the truth was out, and me, I was finally free. Free from the guilt, free from the manipulation, free from the family that never saw me as anything more than a transaction. And that freedom, that was worth more than any inheritance